What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Ladies Who Bronche. I am Julissa.
What's good, everybody? This is Skittles.
And this week, we got somebody particularly special. Magical, I would even say. You can see him in Puffs off Broadway, and he's been in Locked Up Bitches with us. So for those of you guys who've seen him and remember the officer who was Big Papa, we have Alex Haynes this week. Alex, who the fuck are you?
I am Alex Haynes, long form Alexander Kenneth Thomas Haynes, if you really want to go there. I was born in New York, and I lived here till I was 6. Then we moved to Iowa City. Then I moved to Kansas City, and now I'm back in New York. I'm a Manhattan boy who got raised in the Midwest. I am biracial. I'm a black man who looks white. Sometimes mistaken for Puerto Rican or Jewish, depending on.
I definitely thought you were Boricua when I met you.
Yeah.
I'm not even gonna lie.
I have little old ladies come up to me and they start speaking Spanish. I'm like, I'm so sorry. I have to let you down. I know you're looking for somebody who can speak the language, but it's not me. And I'm a soon-to-be dad.
Congrats again on that.
From zaddy to daddy.
From zaddy to daddy.
That's right. In 9 months flat.
Yeah.
And I'm also happily married, so nobody. No need.
You can't holla at him.
Yeah.
When he gives his Instagram handle later, it's not for you to shoot in his DM, all right? I'm here protecting his wife and his child.
Yes.
Stay away.
All nasty comments got to be public on the picture.
On the
itself.
picture.
Yes.
That's the only rule. And I'm a human being out here living. And I'm a man in his 30s in 2018, whatever that means.
Word.
Wow.
And it's so interesting. I actually did not know about you, that you grew up in the Midwest. Tell me a little bit about that. What was that like?
So both my parents they were from Kansas, and so I had both sets of grandparents who lived there. So from an early age, I was taking planes for the holidays from New York City when we lived on 5th Avenue between 107 and 108, 1255 Fifth Avenue. I'm not there anymore. So
so it's all right that you gave that.
I'm not living that kind of life.
Word.
And so I knew what Kansas was, and and I knew like what Connecticut, New Jersey was. But when my parents told me we were moving to Iowa City, which I was like, where the fuck is that? So my mom got a job at the University of Iowa Medical Center there, and so we moved there, and I basically had first grade through 5th grade in Iowa City, and that's where the University of Iowa is. So it's like a small college town, and if you went to like a regular state school or anywhere kind of in a nice small college town, you have an idea of what Iowa City is like. And it was a lot different. It was a lot wider. I remember going there, and Iowa City was the first time I ever thought about the fact that my parents were different colors. And funnily enough, it was the only Asian kid in my class, and my mom had come to just sort of view the kindergarten class or the first grade class to make sure it was cool. She was very much like, I need to see what's going on here, make sure this is right for my son. And he was like, why is your mom a different color than you? And I was like, I don't know. That's my mom. Like, I never thought about it that way. And that's where, so that was the beginning of me even questioning what my racial identity was. And I was in, I think we called it like multi-ethnic club or something along, diversity club, something like that. And we had a really progressive teacher principal at the time. And so it was me, the two other black kids, Viola and Camille, and then like the one Latina, and maybe a couple of other people. I know there was a girl who was deaf, and so she came. And actually, I should say he, because that person is trans and is now living as who they are as a man. But at the time, I knew them differently. Anyway, and so it was really surprising to have, even though we were the only black kids, and you couldn't tell that I was black unless I told you, to have that kind of support and education from a white woman in the middle of the country was pretty cool. And then eventually I moved to Overland Park, Kansas, which is where basically I was 15 minutes away from my dad's parents, where he grew up. And we were 45 minutes from my mom's family, and basically they were like, we're in the Midwest, we might as well get to where we can see our folks and have our kids have a relationship with their grandparents. And so that's where I went from basically 6th grade through to when I graduated college and moved here. So yeah, I was like,
wow. So
Wow,
you
left
went
New
through,
York.
yeah,
Yeah.
like.
yeah, I left. I was always, when I left New York, I was like, I'm a New Yorker. You better watch out. I learned how to ride my bike in New York City. You Iowa City kids, you Overland Park kids, you don't know shit. And then I came back to New York City as an adult. I moved here in 2010, and I was like, oh shit, I'm from Kansas. Like, I'm a Kansan. I became a suburban kid. I'd gotten so used to driving everywhere with 45-mile-per-hour speed limits in Target and Kentucky Hut and all this stuff. And so I had to like check myself and be like, okay, yeah, I was born here, but the majority of my formative years were spent somewhere else, and I have to be okay with that and recognize that I'm getting lost a little bit and I don't quite know exactly where I'm going, and that's okay.
Yeah.
So it was a transition, but that's where I've been at.
Nice.
Wow.
And so, just out of my curiosity, now that you're about to be a dad, like, do you think, like, do you ever consider leaving New York and raising your kid outside of New York?
Ooh.
You're so
I'm like the
intrigued by the
audience.
question.
Ooh, yeah.
Where's it gonna go? I think it was yes and no. I mean, always my wife's name is Jill. Always Jill and I have been thinking about what would we do? Can we have a kid in the city? And one of the things that I didn't realize was one of the blocks to her envisioning being a mom here is that the first 6 years of my entire life were right here in this city. I live on the basically Morningside Heights, and so I live only about 1.3 miles from my first home ever. So I can go to my original stomping ground anytime I want.
Yeah.
And for her, she grew up in Kansas, and her entire childhood was spent there. So when I'm thinking about a kid and what it's like to have a child, I'm like, I was in a stroller in New York City. I was in my parents' hands on the subway and riding taxis. At my first word was taxi, and for her, she's used to backyards and all this stuff that we don't have here in the city, and so it's always been a conversation. But where both of our careers are now, she works for YPC, which is the Young People's Chorus of New York City. Shout out to them. They're a really amazing nonprofit chorus for youth of all income levels and of all ethnicities here in the city, from 8 to 18. And so she's happy with her job, and she finally got to a point where she could envision what it would be like to be a mom here. And there was this sort of disconnect that she was like, well, if we don't make enough money to have this, and this, how are we going to do this? And then she sort of came around to being able to envision it. And I was like, oh yeah, this is a new idea to you. For me, this is just the first 6 years of my life.
Yeah.
And so now we're in a position where our careers are on an upward trend. I'm an actor. I don't know if I've said that or not yet. And so our hope is that we can remain here. I mean, I think like every New Yorker, it's like, yeah, we want to have a place in the city, and then we'll get some place upstate, and and we'll go there. And depending on how much time we need to spend wherever we need to spend it, we'll spend it there. But we're not going anywhere right now.
Yeah. And honestly, like, I think it's so interesting because, like, I born and raised in New York, have not lived anywhere else but the Bronx in my whole life. And even within New York City, there's so many pockets. Like, like the people who grew up in Brooklyn and Park Slope, who I went to in LaGuardia, very different New Yorkers than me and my crew in the South Bronx. So I think there's so much opportunity, and I think it's lovely. I love when people do raise their kids in the city because there is that New York attitude. I do, when I travel, say, yeah, I'm from New York. Fuck out of here. Or when I catch an attitude, I'm like, well, I'm from the South Bronx, so this is controlled right now. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I have so much pride in that. And I feel like anybody who can own a little New York City pride, even if you guys do go to the Midwest at some point, like, give that kid some New York City.
100%. I mean, because I think you look at the ease and the safety of a Midwest childhood, and it was definitely I walked home from school, and New York kids do the same thing. You can spot a New York City kid a mile away because it's like a 10-year-old with the eyes of a tiger.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it literally everything Julissa just said, but from the mouth of a 10-year-old.
Right.
But there's no making up for the diversity and the fact that we're all on top of each other, and you learn to respect other human beings.
Yep.
And have other human beings who look and sound nothing like you, and accept them as just part of life in a way that kids from the Midwest don't get. And I know that from my experience in life.
Yeah.
And often being the only black person in my classroom, and half the kids in the class don't even know that I am. And so to imagine, especially having a child that's going to be essentially 1/4 black, and like, what does that even mean?
Wow. Yeah. When you said that, I was like, damn. Yeah. Yeah.
I've got my fingers crossed that there's like genes are going to swim around and they're going to come out real dark.
Yeah.
But the truth is they're going to come out like a white ghost.
Yeah.
And they're going to be an African American ghost. You know what I mean? And it's that's, I think, maybe the scariest thing about fatherhood to me is, how do I connect my child to their roots when my mother, my black parent, is no longer living, and when they are that much more removed from their African American heritage, and certainly will not be treated by the world like a person of color.
Yeah.
And so how do you give that child that power while in a way that is effective to them, while also they're not doing anything that feels forced or fake, or like performing their ethnicity,
right,
or performing their heritage. So that's on my mind for sure.
Word. That's some real shit. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. So Alex, let's jump right into
Segue.
So, what is your favorite brunch plate?
Ooh, man. I've found very much that I have to oscillate between salty and sweet.
Yes.
So it kind of depends. Did I have a really good dessert the night before? Because then I'm probably going to go for a more savory brunch. If I didn't, then I might need a sweet thing. And also, I think it depends on where we're at. Do you specialize in pancakes? Then I maybe have to get the pancakes. But I will say that typically at brunch time, you're going to find me ordering a Belgian waffle with bacon and probably some scrambled eggs.
Yes.
Yes.
I love a waffle.
Yes.
And so with that, what are we gonna be drinking? What is your favorite brunch booze?
Well, it's got to be something that's going to go with my brunch coffee, because I got to have my coffee. I cannot operate without it. I also don't believe in eating a waffle without coffee. But I would say, I'm pretty basic. A mimosa.
Yeah.
A classic mimosa.
It's a classic. Honestly, it works every time. Usually it takes about 6 or 7 for me to hit my... That's it. No more for Julissa. But mimosas work, man. I love them. Awesome. So what was it like when you would go out to eat as a kid?
So we used to go, when I was real little, when we were still living in the city, my parents used to go to El Parador. My mom worked at NYU Medical Center. She was a pathologist. And when I was first born, she was starting her residency. So she was basically beginning her career as a doctor. And we spent a lot of time in the NYU area, like the 30s and, 2nd and 3rd Avenue. So we go to El Parador, and I remember that I was the only kid they would let sit at the bar. So sometimes it'd be like sitting at the bar when my parents were having Greyhounds or something, or we'd be sitting in a booth and I'd just be dipping chips into cheese, and they'd be trying to convince me not to crawl on the floor. Meanwhile, I want to crawl on the floor because I'm a little kid.
Right.
And it just felt... In my memory as a child, it never felt like, okay, we have to like treat this kid like a kid. I think I was well behaved enough, or my parents just wanted to live their life the way they used to enough, that I was just part of the adults.
Right.
Because I was the first of my parents' group of friends to have a kid. I was the main I was the main baby.
Yeah.
So I was kind of their form of entertainment. So it was cool to have me there. So yeah, it'd be my parents chatting, doing whatever they were doing, and I'm probably playing with Hot Wheels and eating cheese.
Nice. I love it. And what is your favorite bochinche, like gossip, to talk about at a food table?
Ooh, I like to know who's hooking up with who wants to hook up with who should hook up with who.
That's the best.
I'm all about it. I love to I'll keep secrets. I'm not like somebody who's not trustworthy in that regard. But ooh man, I love to be like, you know what? Juan at rehearsal the other day, I'm telling you, so and so and so and so, if they're not doing it, they're about to do it. Because you should see. Because I'm that person who in a room, I'm happy to like be a part of the conversation, but I also am equally comfortable sitting back and watching everything develop and just being like, okay, yeah, I see what's happening here.
And I peeped that during Locked Up Bitches, by the way. There was one day, I forgot who was talking, and you were just like sort of sitting and like looking around, and I was like, yo, he's listening, and I'm listening too.
and that's the best thing when you have that friend and you just make eye contact. You're like, we know what's going on.
I heard that shit. Yeah, definitely. Awesome. So now we're going to move into our Cheers to the Ladies Who, where we shout out people who are doing dope shit and dope shit that has happened. We're back. Bronche is back. So that's really exciting. We've been off air, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the reasons why we've been off air for a little bit, but we're not gone. We're definitely not forgotten because people have been hitting me up, which is exciting because it means you guys are listening. So thank you for listening. We're back. And yeah, I just wanted to highlight that. Skittles, anything on us being back? Are you excited to be here?
What?
Are you excited to be here?
Yes, even though it is a Tuesday night and I'm tired. So on our little hiatus, I was invited to go attend Hispanicize LA, which was very fun. Shout out to Jose Resendez and Rachel D. Matos from Blue Lotus Collective, who were involved in getting me out there.
Amazing.
And Hispanicize is just a really fun conference where they invite a bunch of Latinx influencers, bloggers, brands, podcasters, whatever you name it. If it's Latinx, they had it there. And it's just a bunch of like conferences where you can kind of network and get to know a bunch of different people. And I got to meet a lot of cool people. Shout out to Daniel from the Plot Twist podcast, who Daniel. I spent a good amount of time with. He's cool. We should be doing his podcast soon.
Yes.
Shout out to In Bed with Bella, who is a YouTuber who also works for Blavity. Blavity. And I talked to her about getting her on here. So shout out to her. And a bunch of different people. Curly, Gabriel,
yes,
Julissa, Jenny, the Chonga girls, all of those people, they were all there. And it was mad fun.
Yeah.
And I can't wait to go back to LA because it gets funner and funner every time I go back.
Because you're building community out there. You're getting a whole family, and it's so awesome to have things like Hispanicize because it feels so isolating when you feel like you're a niche group and you're a niche creator, and it's so empowering when you're like in a room. Like the fact that there's another Julissa that exists who is a content creator actually excites me because A, I don't know many Julissas, and B, it's like here's another Dominican woman in the space, and like I need to know her because we don't want to be the only ones. I feel like there's this impression with creators of color that we always want to be like the only one, but that's not true. We just think we can only be the only ones because that's the way media has structured it. But like you don't see white people competing all the time, you know? Like sometimes you do, but because there's so many different like types of white people that you can be. You can be a Jerry Seinfeld, you can be a Tom Hanks, you can be like there's so many, and it's okay, but it's like there's one Julissa. And like right now she's the Julissa, but like we need to live in a space where it can be the two Julissas, the 5, 10, 15, a million Juans. Like anyway, so I'm excited. Shout out to Hispanicize. I'm so glad.
That was really fun.
And I definitely was having FOMO the whole time I was out there. But I appreciate everybody who sent their hellos and all that stuff. I felt very, very loved. So another thing I'm excited about, Netflix has a new show coming out called Siempre Bruja, which is always witch. Right? Which is it's an Afro-Latina character who sort of like time travels and has these witch powers. That shit is dope.
Yeah, that sounds dope as hell.
I am really, and I've, especially lately, like I've been like really into the whole like connecting with your intuition and learning about, like, you know, the religions that are African rooted are rooted in a lot of things that people condemn as, like, voodoo or santeria and things that are, like, no-nos, but, like, actually educating yourself, as with many things, you learn the things that are untrue. And so I'm actually interested to see how this show is going to portray the bruja culture in an Afro-Latinx way. The fact that she's Afro-Latinx and stuff is already promising. I just hope that they get it right.
Yeah. I also think it's interesting timing because they just started that reboot of Charmed.
Yes.
And they tried to spin it as like a, oh, well, like, we're having a Charmed reboot, but they're all, like, people Latina. Of color. They're all Latina. But, like, only one of them is Afro-Latina, and the other two aren't. So I think it's interesting to see, like, if this will be the real one, and then Charmed will be, like, the one that people are like, that's whack.
We'll see.
Or maybe Charmed will be popping. I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah, we'll see.
Hopefully, maybe they're both popping.
Maybe they're both popping. Because they could be two.
Right. There can be two shows about witches of color.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll look out for that and see. Because Netflix also, like, and this isn't a cheers, but Netflix is cutting motherfuckers.
Netflix is killing it, too.
Yeah, this week, Orange is the New Black, which was naturally coming to an end, but Orange is the New Black. Luke Cage got cut this week. I was just like, damn, bro. And more to come, is the scary part. And I'm just like, who else they gonna cut? You know, that's why I watch reruns. I don't got time to be emotionally attached to TV shows.
I like that they're, like, cutting shit because it also means new stuff is gonna come.
Absolutely. Like. But there's just so much shit. Like, I love the choice, but it's actually overwhelming, and then it makes me anxious because I'm like, I want to watch all 10 shows, but I don't have the time, and so I feel like I'm missing out in life. And so if, like, 3 friends are watching one and 3 friends are watching the other, it's like I'm like fucking mind fucked left and right with how much content I have. But it's dope. And Netflix, hit me up. Like, I got a show for you too. Y'all accepted anything. Alex is Black could be on Netflix.
Seriously.
Yeah, we got some stuff to fill those shoes that you guys just opened up.
So another awesome thing that's happening, because fuck the NFL.
Oh yes. So a bunch of artists are starting to turn down performing at the Super Bowl for Colin Kaepernick, like Pink, Cardi B, Rihanna. You guys mentioned Jay-Z before.
And Beyonce.
I think it's cool. Yeah. I'm here for it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I wonder, though, like, right now, so, like, it's an honor, right, to perform. It's, quote, unquote, it's an honor to perform at the Super Bowl. What if someone says yes that we really like? What are we going to do? Are we going to cancel? I just feel like right now we're in a habit of cancellation. And I'm just interested.
That's
like,
true.
if, I'm trying to think, who's an awesome Black person? If Stevie Wonder, for whatever crazy reason, said yes to the Super Bowl, I'm not going to cancel Stevie. I might, say something like, come on, Stevie. Yeah. But I'm not going to cancel Stevie.
I mean, especially because it's like, we just lost Aretha.
Right.
You don't want
to,
he's only going to be around for so much longer. And the other thing is, it's like, think about all of the African American men and women that are involved in the league that we're not sitting there going, why aren't you on strike? You know what I mean? We have to, like, find a balance. I do think that it's a little bit easier for artists in this position whose income isn't dependent upon being part of the NFL to turn it down.
Absolutely.
But at a certain point,
I mean, if they wanted me to do it, I might. No, I'm kidding.
That's a great example, because I would be like, ooh, tough one.
But it's like for Juan, that would be a come up.
Yeah.
If it's for someone coming up, then
we should be for it.
Yeah.
It's like, use them to raise yourself up.
Yeah. I could work with that.
All right, if it's for someone coming up, do it, but make sure you make a statement.
Oh, take a
jab. Take a jab.
Yeah. Like take a knee during the
performance. Yeah.
Like, or just like,
or perform the whole shit on your knees.
Oh, what if Stevie Wonder did it, but he played the piano on his knees
the whole time? Yeah.
I'm here for it.
I would love that. I mean, that year Beyonce did the almost Black Panther costume thing. I was like, yes, but and I'm not even a huge Beyonce fan, and I was like, girl, you better fucking wear that beret on that fucking stage.
Because it was so unapologetic.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, totally. So another awesome thing, the Chicago police officer, even though this happened a while ago, but I want to mention it because that shit's dope. I mean, it's not dope that we had to lose Laquan, but it's dope that for the first time, especially in this climate, we're seeing a certain level of justice.
Yeah, and in Chicago, a city that is historically unjust.
Yeah.
And I think that with like the Parkland students and all the students that are out there for gun violence. You have the Chicago contingent that's coming and saying, you guys don't even know the half of it. You know, your school is one thing. What about everyday life? What about your street? What about your porch? And so to have somebody be held accountable for that action and to at least to a small degree show the world, like, yeah, you can't do this.
Yeah.
Maybe 1 out of 100, but at least 1 out of 100 are gonna be punished.
I mean, we need something to stand on, honestly, as a community right now. Like, I feel like people say, I don't have a leg to stand on. Like, people aren't getting indicted, laws are being changed, gun laws don't seem to be making any sort of progress. So what gives, And so, like, it's a little bit of give. Do we deserve a lot more? Absolutely. But, like, hopefully, and especially, like you said, for the city of Chicago, super important. It actually even makes me think about when the Parkland event happened, I was, like, very proud of the young people. But I was slightly disappointed at the people who were showing an overwhelming amount of support, who I've also seen aware of other situation in which that same level of support and energy was called for. And so I just hope that this shows people that the two things can be true. We can support kids like the kids in Parkland, and we also can support the youth in Chicago.
Yeah.
They're both equally important. And, like, what's been happening in Chicago has always been happening in Chicago. And that's not to say Florida is not important, but it's like, now that, yes, these Florida kids, awesome. Now that we have your attention, here's every other city. Chicago, there's more. Fuck, the South Bronx. Like, where I live, like, there's still gunshots. Like, there's still, like, people are getting, and it is the young kids gangbanging and shit like that. And, and it's important. And my boys matter, and the girls in my community and the young people in every community. So let's see where we're going with this. And Chicago, speaking of Chicago, a sidetrack, Kanye West in the White House.
Oh,
I don't even.
I wonder, when he was talking about it, he did mention Chicago. And I wonder how helpful or hurtful it is when he does, because, like, in his, like, scatterbrained rants, sometimes there are gems of information. If you can hear it through all the bullshit, and if you literally have the patience for it, because there are people who, like, can't even, like, it doesn't matter if he has a valid point, I can't even hear him talk. And then there are people who are like, no, you just not woke and you don't understand what he's saying, he's out here, blah, blah, blah. And then there's people like me who are literally in the middle, because I love Kanye West, and I still love Kanye West the man. I think that he needs help. I think that there's a lot going on with him right now. I don't think I'm responsible for saving him. He's a grown-ass man with tons of money and fucking resources that I don't even have anywhere near my fingertip. But I do feel, in a symbolic way, responsible for standing by people with mental health issues, which I 100%, and he knows, and he's been open about, exist. And so I'm interested about mental health in the community. But that aside, do we still want people like Kanye repping Chicago and advocating for them, even if it means that he seems to be buddying up with Trump?
Well, I mean, take this most recent example. He was there because they wanted to talk about violence in Chicago. It was supposed to be about Chicago. And yet I didn't even know that he mentioned Chicago once, because first of all, I had no interest in watching the whole rant. I saw snippets. I watched Vice News did some clips of it. And I remember thinking, this might be the thing that keeps me from listening to his next album. Everything up to this point, I'm like, but his music, though. Yeah. Like, his music, his production, everything. For forever, we've always said Kanye's kind of an asshole. And certainly as his mental health issues have come to light, it's like, well, okay, there's also that to take into account. But at this point, it's like, I understand what he's trying to do, but I think he's doing so much damage to be out there and to have white folks go, oh, well, look, this black person feels this way, and so why are the Black Lives Matter folk acting the way that they are? Because isn't Kanye someone that you all, you know what I mean? I think it's just he's opening a door to a conversation, whether he means to or not, whether he's in control of himself or not. He's causing damage that I think is different damage than he's ever done before.
Yeah, I can agree. And it's interesting because when Kim went to the White House and she was able to get, I can't remember the woman's name, but she got her out of jail. A lot of people were like, oh, well, maybe it's not such a bad thing that the West's family is, like, sort of mingling with Trump. But I think your point is very, very valid. And I agree, actually. Yeah, it can be really damaging sometimes. I just want him to come back to us. Like, I want him to be able to say, yes, it is important to love all people and, like, all that. I'm so down for that message. I just want him to understand, again, this thing of two things being true at the same time. That's true. But it is also true that despite all the love you're throwing at certain people, their hate runs so deep that it takes a little more than love to get them to see where you're at. And that's what he's not.
Yeah, he's like giving Trump a pass.
Yeah.
And the other thing about that Kanye White House meeting was what struck me was what he said about women when he was like, I couldn't rock with Hillary because Trump made me feel like, whatever. I don't remember exactly, but like
he
my
was
dad.
talking about his dad
and I'm like,
and how feeling the hat made him feel like a Superman.
It's like, Kanye, we all know that your break from reality began when your mother died because of the strength of your relationship with your mother, and you're gonna sit here and throw women under the bus, a specific woman, Hillary, but women in general, and say that you're going to rock with this guy, especially in the wake of all the Kavanaugh stuff and everything else. And he must have an understanding of how women in general feel about this president. And to do that on top of what his contribution or lack thereof to the black community or the community of Chicago as a whole, like to then go with women, I'm like, Donda West is, if there's a heaven, she's up there going, oh,
like, yeah,
come on.
Over and over again. I truly believe it. On that note, moving to our tuta loca is, where we call motherfuckers out who are doing the most. Now, so the Trump administration is trying to erase the identity of the trans community. I don't really have much that I can say that hasn't already been said, but I will say that this is why, as an ally, this is where we have to set the fuck up. This is my job. This needs to matter to me as much as it matters to me that there's children in cages, that there's a lot of police officers that are out free after killing innocent people, that Brett Kavanaugh is in the Supreme Court. Like, it needs to be that important to me as a cis woman if I am a true ally. And I mean, like, I don't know is really what I'm saying. Like, I don't know how to react to it aside from saying, okay, the shit just got real. Well, not just got real, but shit's real. And we got to move forward and we got to do something about it. How did you guys react when you first heard that?
I'm not as shocked that he's trying, because I feel like this is something that he's been moving towards. But I don't know. It's just like, at this point, I don't want to say like I'm numb to it, but I'm just like, I'm not shocked. I understand that it's something that we have to fight and we're obviously going to speak out against. But it's just like, all right, add it onto the
list, add it to the pile.
Onto the pile.
Yeah, it feels very much that way. I was just listening to a podcast I listened to yesterday called Pod Save America, and they were talking about how this isn't necessarily a Trump thing, that it was kind of a Republican thing that was bubbling up, that regardless if they had gotten some other Republican in as president, that it would have gone this way anyway. And that's a disappointing thing to hear, because it'd be nice to just assign that to Trump and to his type of politics, but
there's just like a whole group of people that think this way.
Yeah. And I think it bears saying that, number one, it's just another reason to continue fighting on top of everything Julissa just said, but also, like, trans people are human, and and whatever laws people try to make, there are those of us with open hearts and clear heads who know that you can't erase trans people.
Yeah.
No matter what.
I think one thing to put a little light in this, annoyingness of Trump is that I had a conversation with like a group of 14 to 15-year-olds about the idea of like trans bathrooms and are they important and all that stuff. And like, it was specifically about when Obama decided that schools had to honor students' gender identity. And the kids are aware of what it is to respect someone's gender identity, and they don't see it as a big deal, and there are more kids and teenagers out now that are more accepting and more caring about this subject than there were when we were younger. And
Absolutely.
That's something good to see
Yeah.
in the youth, at least.
Yeah.
But everything else with these people is bullshit.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. The future, is in the hands of our kids. So it's comforting to know that. Voter fraud is happening. So we know that all the election day is coming up, and people have been like trying to get their votes in. And my roommate specifically, actually, she lives with me in the Bronx, but is still registered in North Carolina. And to which her response to not registering here is like, we know New York, hopefully, knock on whatever, is going to go blue because New York tends to go blue. She knows her vote counts heavily in North Carolina. She did her absentee ballot, blah, blah, blah. She went through this long process. It literally took her a week to get the instructions because on every website that she went to that is like of the state and everything like that, had no clear instructions, because it seems like they have a very clear understanding that a lot of the people that have left, are probably left leaning. So they don't want those votes to count. So took her a week to figure out how to do it. And now her ballot that she submitted is lost.
What?
Oh my
She went through
God.
hell and high water. And, it was really, she put a lot of thought into the decision. She was like, but this is, I'm in the Bronx now, and this is also a community that needs attention. So I want to make sure, even if it's Democrat, are we voting in, the right person is an independent on this ballot versus the Democrat person who's, running for this position. And so, but she stuck to North Carolina, right? So now it's she's like, so am I just not voting? Am I just suddenly now not voting? So she's actually considering going down to North Carolina on election day, just to be surprise, bitch.
Wow. she should.
And I think that that's important. In Georgia, there was a bus full of black senior citizens who were being taken to go vote, and the bus got stopped, and they were told to get off of the bus. So they didn't get to go vote. It was dozens of people. That's dozens
crazy.
of people. Some of these elections have literally been called so closely that a couple hundred is the difference. And a couple hundred is actually not that much in certain states and in certain areas. And it's really about mobilizing the people to come out. So if people are literally commissioning buses, and the buses that are being commissioned are being stopped. My roommate doing her research, blah, blah, blah. She is now being stopped. I can't imagine the amount of shit that we're going to hear after election day. Of day of shit, people stopping and questioning and blah, blah, blah. People were being intimidated in certain states when they were going to register to vote, just to register, let alone show up.
Did you hear recently, this may have been something Trump said just yesterday or this morning, I can't remember, but he said something along the lines of, basically it was a threat to people who were planning on voting illegally. It was like, well, they better watch out because if we catch them. And I wish I could remember the exact quote, but essentially it was an open-faced threat to people. And imagine being one of those black folks on that bus, and you went through all the effort that you went through, each individual, and you get thrown off the bus, and then you hear that from your president. And so that the system is literally fighting you just so you can exercise your American right, these rights that we claim that we care so much about. People, it's crazy. Have you guys heard about South Dakota, the Native Americans there?
Very vaguely, yeah.
Basically, it's that if you have a P.O. box, your vote, you can't vote. You need an actual address. But our government doesn't issue Native Americans actual addresses because they don't recognize their streets. They get P.O. boxes.
Yeah.
So what they're saying is, hey, we don't give you, based on the way our system works, we don't give you what you need to vote. And what we do give you, we're going to now claim that that's not enough to be able to vote.
Which is ridiculous.
Wow.
Which is 100% ridiculous. And I wish I could remember what there was one specific instruction that my roommate was given that wasn't true. Oh, ID, her ID or something had to say North Carolina on it. And she was like, I guess that disqualifies. And then she did extensive research and was like, that's completely untrue. And that's listed as a fact. That's going to turn so many people away. And think about the fact that it took her a week. I know my ass. I'm lazy as fuck. I'm not taking a week.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Especially if, this is not me, Julissa's real case, but there are people who they're voting because people have annoyed them to death. They're like, okay, fine, fuck, it's important, I will go. Imagine being that person and then needing to actually do a week's worth of research to find what you need to find. Right. They're not making that week. They're not gonna vote. They're not gonna vote. So it's just scary. It's scary. It's real. Hunger Games was on at my parents' house the other day, and I was just and I saw. I can't remember his name, the dude with the white rose garden. And I was just like, wow, yep, That reminds me a lot of our president. Wonder what he's hiding under that toupee. Because in the movie, he has roses to hide the smell of blood that's always on him. I wonder what he hides under that motherfucking toupee, motherfucker.
Ooh, his taxes.
His taxes. Show me the receipts. Yeah. Anyway, last thing. So apparently there's plastic in our salt. So we're sprinkling plastic on our food. An article came out this week that was talking about how the years of plastic and pollution that we've put into the ocean has broken down eventually, right? So some of it, so there's remnants of plastic that has been tested and found in salt that is being sort of like collected, right? And it's 92% of the salts brands that they tested came back. So it's not like one thing came back and like all of a sudden, literally, yeah. Some of them had as low as 28 pieces. Some of them had as much as 13,000 pieces of plastic.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so this was from the Environmental Science and Technology publication. Yeah, and so it's like it's in our seafood, it's in the wildlife. So then the fish that we're eating or seafood that we're eating also has that fucking plastic inside of it. And it's not necessarily BPA free or anything like that. So it's almost like you can't fucking escape the toxins. Like, we're all going to die of cancer is what I'm like convinced of. Like,
yeah. I mean, you either eat terrible tasting food or you die of cancer. I mean, it does sort of feel like it's just everywhere.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Wow.
It's scary. I don't know. Eat less salt. Eat less salt. Start eating pepper. Start using adobo. I don't know. Skittles, you look like you want to say something.
No. I'm just thinking, like, I literally, like, wow.
Yeah. Like, wow is the right word. All right, so now we're going to move into our topics. So, our topic of the day, yes, I'm Black. So, as we know, and Alex has said, yes, he is biracial. But there are plenty of biracial people in the world who have to deal with a lot of shit that those of us who aren't biracial maybe don't even think about or consider. I will say it's interesting when you do live in communities where colorism is real. So, like, as a Latina, like, you know, all Latinos, if there's lighter skinned ones, they have a different experience than darker skinned Latinos. And that's always really polarizing and being sort of like shifted back and forth between what feels like two cultures. So as an Afro-Latina, yes, and I was raised in New York City. So like I identify very much with African-American culture. I know I'm Black, right? But I was not raised necessarily, and not by my parents, but like society did not raise me to think I was Black. They raised me to say, you're Dominican, you're Latina. But then they also raised me saying, and Sofia Vergara and Shakira, and those are the representations of who you are. And I sat there like, but Janet Jackson, but Beyonce, but all these other women who feel a lot closer to my experience. And so you get ping pong back and forth. But the biracial experience is more specific than that.
Yeah, you know, first of all, I think especially when you're Black and white, because of the history of our country, it's like, so you're on the, you know, you're the two sides. You're a jet and you're a shark.
Yeah.
In a way, you know?
Yeah.
And for me in particular, that being somebody whose minority status is not readily visible to most people, and even when it is, it's my specific minority status is not visible. So this thing that is half of me in a genetic sense, but you know, wholly part of my entire person is not readily apparent to people. And that has been an interesting experience growing up in the Midwest. Certainly there are plenty of people who, it's like I've developed this habit of feeling like I have to announce to people what I am within the first few conversations I have of them when I make new friends or meet new people, especially in school. You know, we're talking about the Civil War, and I have to say, oh, you know, so my mom is Black, and like here are my credentials. Essentially, right. Like let me let you know that I have a card. I'm in the club,
right.
So I'm allowed to speak on these things from the perspective of a person who in your mind should have darker skin than me. But then also growing up and just feeling like I am, why do I have to figure out what my labels are? Like I wonder for you, Julissa, when you say that you're Afro-Latino, do you have to feel like sometimes you know trying to put yourself in a specific box, because we live in a world that wants to put people in a specific box, And sometimes maybe you're feeling one way, you're feeling another way, but ultimately you don't want to have to define one thing because that leaves something out.
Yeah, 100%. I feel that way. And with me, it happens a lot where I'm like, I find like I get really Dominican sometimes, but then I just actually get really black, and black in the sense of how Latin people identify as African American, because we are black, but because they haven't accepted that we're black, I have to say I'm leaning black as opposed to just being myself. But then there's moments where, like, you know, as much as I'm down and like enjoying the African American culture, there are moments, especially in school growing up, like where I would then something that was very Dominican would come into play in the conversation because of its relevance and connection, and because we, you know, African American kid and Dominican girl were not sort of taught how to deal with each other's backgrounds and what that means. What would often happen is the black kids would be like, especially when I was talking about my hair, the girls would be like, "Oh, shut up, your hair is not that bad. Oh, your hair is not difficult. Shut up." And there was a lot of shutting me up about trying to bring in my Latino part when I was around black people. And then when I was with Latino people and trying to bring in the blackness, they're like, that's that American shit. You know? And no, we all have that same thing, interestingly enough. But I wonder, for you as an actor, what is the experience like being a biracial actor?
You know, I feel like I have a very specific idea of what that is, and part of my trying to unpack that is always wondering, is this something that I'm putting onto myself, or these are just things I'm imagining, or is this actually the way it is? But for me, the way I experience it is that, for those who don't know, if you're not an actor, if you've never seen a casting breakdown, for example, what will happen is, if it's Orange is the New Black, they'll say, we need these characters, and they have a description. The breakdown is the description of what those characters are. And so often it will say Latina or mixed ethnicity or African American, or it'll say white specifically, right? Or it may say all races. But usually they will give some designation as to what those races are. Then they'll go further and say this character is, you know, a single mother who's just been locked up, whatever. But it'll usually start with the age and ethnicity of what that character is.
Yeah.
And so for me, on the one hand, because I am not obviously one thing, I'm not obviously anything, I often get put in this ethnically ambiguous category, which when I first moved to New York, I was like, oh man, I'm gonna work. Okay, I'm ethnically ambiguous. I can play this, I can play that, I can do this. You can't put me in a box. But as an actor, I've learned that the industry, they really want to put you in a box.
They love boxes.
They need them, and it makes sense to a certain extent, because if you're a casting director and you're 1,000 people submit to you, and there are 900 of those that are people who fit into a million different boxes, but 100 of them fit into the box that you're trying to fill right in this moment, well then boom, you want to keep your job, so you're going to go for those people. Yeah. It makes sense because just the speed at which the business moves, but it also doesn't serve us actors as people, and it certainly is one of the reasons why the business has been as whitewashed as it has been up to this point. So for me, I always think, okay, well, if the breakdown is African American, I am African American, but if it's a character, because of where I am in my career, I'm not going in for the recurring roles. I'm not going in for the lead roles. I'm going in for the one-liners, the two-liners. So are they, if this is a character who's African American, and it specifically has to be African American, often it means it's like a gang member or whatever. Well, if they cast me as that gang member, then, and that gang member needs to be, let's say, part of a black gang for the purposes of the story, do they then have to say, oh, and by the way, America, middle America, everywhere in the country, black people can look like this too? Right. Or are they just going to get a person with darker skin, and so that part of the story is told without having to say or spend any extra time? Because in every industry, time is money, but certainly in the film industry, where you have 30 minutes to tell your story or 45 minutes to tell your story, having to explain to people who may not know that this character actually does fit into the category that the character is supposed to, that this actor fits into this category, they're not going to take that time. And so for me, I always think, well, I'm not going to get cast as a black person. Yeah. I'm going to get cast as a half black person or a white character or or one whose ethnicity doesn't matter. But I'm never going to be, or at least up to this point, I don't see myself getting cast as a black character or getting called in to play parts that are specifically for African Americans, because they're African Americans who look like I do aren't represented out in our world, and so the world doesn't see me as African American.
Yeah. And how does that, like, make you feel, just in the sense of, like, it happens on both sides, too, where, like, I wonder, theoretically, let's say the same gang situations, you do get cast, and they don't do explaining because they don't feel like they need to, and they just do that, and they throw you, and you might be, let's say, the lead gang member. Now it becomes a conflict of, like, yes, now we're representing different shades of black, but then there will be that group of people who go, why the light-skinned one gotta be the, you know?
Yeah, that's one of my biggest fears, is in general as a biracial actor, but ultimately as a biracial person, as a black person, is being rejected by other black people, by them telling me that I'm not black enough. And it's not something I've ever heard yet in my 32 years of life so far. Not from a black person.
Good.
From white people, I have. White people have told me I'm not black, but never another black person. But it's something that I do wonder, because there is that the light skin versus dark skin. On the train here, there were these teenage boys, and they were in a mood and all, and like kind of, you know, teasing each other and messing around. And I heard one boy go, "Oh, well, light skinned dudes is weaker anyway." And
Team light skin.
Yeah. And
the whole Drake complex. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know that part of that is like people who have darker skin trying to reclaim the beauty of having darker skin, because we as a society, it's like, yeah, we love black people, but they need to be like within these certain shades, or at least those are the ones that have been exalted more often than not.
Yeah.
And so to answer your question, like what would happen? I don't know. I'd be sad that was the case, but also at least it would begin a conversation.
Yeah.
Because it is something, it does exist. I think, you know, that is an issue, and how do we feel about that?
Yeah. And absolutely, it's almost like compromising. Like, I oftentimes, when I am speaking to my biracial friends, it almost feels like they have to compromise how they feel about something on the black issue, because then they remember that they're white, and then they feel like, well, I can't ignore that I'm white, and if I say this and remembering that I'm white, if another white person said this would be the reaction. So because I'm also white, might I also get that reaction? So maybe I shouldn't say anything at all. Like, talking to my roommate about politics feels like that sometimes.
The speed at which you're speaking right now is that's the exact speed. That's what every biracial person, that's how we're like, well, that's how it goes. And maybe the words of that internal monologue are different, but it is very much, okay, how do I navigate this so that the minority group that I'm a part of doesn't think that I'm leaning too heavily on my privilege as a white person. But I will say that I feel I've never really felt like I've had to take care of my white side very much, and I think part of that is because that's obvious. The fact that I am white is obvious, or at least to me in my mind. That to the world, it's obvious that I'm white. So what I have to nurture and what I have to take care of, so to speak, is my blackness, and put that out there, because it's something that if I wanted to, I pass, and if I wanted to pass, I can pass. And so there's this process of me having to be like, hey, I'm part of this group.
Yeah.
But that internal conversation certainly does happen.
Yeah.
And how do you, especially when you have people who know you to varying degrees, and so some people know my family, some people don't. You know, I mean, those things also change how you feel like you're willing to, or what's appropriate and what level is appropriate to discuss the conversation. And you know, because you never know how another person of color might be like. And I'm also a cis man, so on top of that, so it's like, look, I get it, you know, you're black, but I don't want to hear from you. You don't get stop and frisk. You don't get pulled over while you're driving. At least I don't, because I've gotten pulled over while I'm driving because I look too young to drive, but not because of the color of my skin. You know, you have that safety in you're wrapped in it. I'm wrapped in this safety, even though if I were to wake up tomorrow and be 10 shades darker, I'd take it.
Yeah.
Like if I could have black skin, oh, sign me up.
Yeah.
So because I don't remember you talking about Alex is Black, and I feel like that's very relevant to what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about how that project came about, why you think the message is so important, and
Sure. So Alex is Black it's a web series, and right now there are 2 episodes available on Vimeo. We have a Facebook page, and if you type in Alex is Black in Google, you can find it. It's also up on my website, alex-haynes.com. And basically, it's about being a white presenting black person in the world. And so the 2 episodes that exist and the episodes that I have written / need to write, like I need to go home and finish writing so that we can shoot them. They're all about situations, some of which have happened in my life, but most have not, that center around the comedy of that, because I do think there is this sort of ridiculous, funny, weird, strange thing. For example, the first episode, basically the idea of it came when I was in a store. I was in Westchester. I was in Scarsdale.
Wow.
Doing my old job teaching soccer to little kids.
Nice.
And I was at a Balducci's, an upscale store, and I was like, I don't know if I was saying a lyric of a song or if I was just talking to myself, and I was like, nigga, please. And as I said it, as I rounded the corner, and I finished saying it, but as soon as I rounded the corner, I almost bumped into a black staff member there. Oh. And in my mind, I was like, oh, if he had heard me say that, I would have had to backtrack like a mother and explain everything and pull up Facebook and pictures. You know what I mean? and so the first episode is basically the sort of what if it's of that situation essentially happening, where a black woman overhears me say the N-word, and it's me feeling like I need to explain that. No, it's cool. I am down. Black, and I have permission to say this. And so the impetus to create the show in general was from me as a person who, at the time, my wife and I were trying to have a child. Now we are succeeding in that. Who I've been getting more and more work in theater, but I want to work in film and on television for numerous reasons, from certainly the financial aspect, but also because I consume way more television than I do theater, and I like that you can be one character instead of telling the same story over and over again, which has its own benefits, and I get something different out of that, but getting to be the same character growing over the course of a season, over the course of several episodes, and the exciting challenge of that as an actor, but also the way those stories can bring families together, and where my family and I can watch the same show even though we're not in the same state, all those things. Right. And I just realized I needed to put myself on. There really aren't roles out there that are specifically about people of color who appear white. Yeah. You have Maya Rudolph, you have Meghan Markle, but they're not, and you have even Rashida Jones, but they're not actually playing characters who are specifically what those actors or actresses are. And so I was like, I got to do this before some other person writes it.
I
have to write my...
Because there can only be one Alex is Black.
That's right. That's right. I'm happy for people to come after me, but I'm trying to get the Netflix deal, okay?
Word.
You can, you can go to Stars or whatever, but I'm trying to get the Netflix deal. But I just... And that has been sort of a battle as an actor to teach myself and push myself and figure out how I can get over my own mental insecurities to write and direct and do things that I'm afraid of failing at, and things that I might not be good at first. And I was just like, I don't care if this ends up being bad or it ends up being not perfect. I can't worry about it being perfect. I just have to do it. And so I did it, and I had a childhood friend who lives in LA, and he's a producer on The Talk. And he and I have sort of talked long about trying to do a project together, and it's been hard because we're on different coasts. And so I wrote 4 episodes, and I shared them with him. He was like, dude, we should do this. And I was like, okay. And so he what he's great at is what I'm not great at, which is looking at the big list of things that need to get done in a creative project and not being scared or put off by it. And he's just like, boom, let's attack this, let's do this. And we made it happen. And so we just wrapped our Indiegogo campaign, and we raised about 60% of what we wanted to raise. Nice. And so now I'm finishing writing the rest of the episodes. Our plan is to do 4 more to have a total of 6 for the first season. And it's just going to be other instances of things that I hope all people can relate to, but that specifically speak to multiracial people. You know, being the person of color in the room when the white people in the room don't know you're a person of color, so they're speaking freely and they're not checking themselves, which I've certainly had happen to me many times in my life. Or there was a moment. You know, other. I don't want to give too much away.
Don't
too much.
spoil
it.
Don't
give any spoilers.
But just lots of things that are told experiences that are told specifically from what it's like to experience those moments as a person of color who doesn't appear to be so. But again, I think ones that can be related to. I look at a show like Insecure.
Yeah, I was thinking it
because that show is so specific to being a black woman in her late 20s, early 30s in LA. And
it's universal. It is because I'm always texting her. She don't really watch the show, and I'm always like, yo, Insecure.
Julissa,
only because it's too real for me. Because I had a romantic situation that was very similar, and I watched the first 4 episodes, and I was like, wow, seeing myself on screen a little too hard. Let me go back to my fantasy shit. And so, but I am a big supporter of the show, huge supporter. Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, that's very real. I love that.
And I think it's interesting, like there's so many layers to this conversation of like being biracial and the different experiences. And the reason I always think about acting, it's even like this week, Kate Blanchett, when she made her comment about, you know, she feels like straight people should be allowed to play characters that are part of the LGBTQAI plus community. And it, you know, like it was sort of like polarizing where it's like, well, yeah, like actors literally act to be someone who's not them. But there's so many things that are not us that are not tied to race, gender, you know, and other identifiers, you know what I mean, of oppressed groups. But it was just such an interesting toss-up. And I can't imagine, like, for me as a Dominican writer, every time, like literally as we speak right now, there's a group of people rehearsing reading my words. And the first thing I heard at the first read was, wow, this is the first time, and there was only one other girl who said second time, that I've ever played a Dominican person. And like that to me is like, bro, like I'm excited to do stretch work, but I'm also excited to just like live my life in front of these large audiences because I care about these stories. I remember when I used to be in school and people used to be like, oh, who wants to volunteer to do skits and stuff? I wasn't trying to be different. I was just really excited to do me and present and share who I was to the rest of the class. And I just, as a biracial actor, I thank you. I appreciate you sharing that. And I also wonder, like, what struggles you guys face, like, even past the audition rooms. Like, once you're in the room, like, does that come into play? Like, is that where you're hearing conversations that are like, oh, they forgot I'm black? Or, oh, you know.
Well, so, for example, when we were filming the second episode of Alex is Black, we did it at a basketball court that used to be right across from where Jill and I lived on 119th Street. And Morningside Avenue in Harlem. Shout out to anybody who plays there that's listening to this. And so it so happened that I had scouted out the location, and but when I did it, there wasn't anybody there. And I was like, I know that people usually come after school around 3:00. We show up around 9:30, and this group of school kids are on their way for recess. And I was like, oh no. So there's this group of school kids, Harlem kids. Thanks to gentrification, they weren't all kids of color, but their teacher, who was a person of color, was like, we had to go talk to them and say, hey, we're filming this thing. And so there were other people all around, right? And there were a couple of moments where some kids were like, what are you guys filming? And the other people of the crew, who the crew was, Okay, so it depends on if you think I always this is something I want to unpack in the show too, is like whether or not Jewish folks are considered also like white, or whether they are part of a minority group. I tend to think that if you've been if your people have been enslaved somewhere, then maybe you don't have all the advantages.
Privilege, yeah.
But let's just say this, that the only white cis males happened to also be Jewish, and then it was women and people of color. So we were a diverse crew, but it wasn't the like our sound guy was also happened to be half black. So nobody looked black necessarily, and we certainly didn't look like a diverse crew. And they were like, "Oh, we're working on Alex is Black," and the kids are like, "Oh, cool." And then an older guy comes along who also happens to be black, and he's like, "What are you guys working on?" "Alex is Black." And he looks around, he's like, and so I'm thinking, and that was it. And he was like, "Okay, cool." But it's
that
like,
said 1,000 words,
right?
yep.
Okay, all right now. It's like, all right. So did he look around, see me, and go, "Okay, I get it," or did he go, "All right, so we got more people gentrifying. We got some more Brooklyn kids gentrifying the neighborhood here, or some network." You know what I mean? Like, he could have thought a million things. I didn't have that conversation with him, but I did sit there and go, "Oh man, it's even happening now." It was such a meta moment. It's like this feeling like I needed to explain myself and justify my embracing of who I am in this project this passion project that I'm putting money into and working on in that very moment, to say, "Oh, by the way, we're not a bunch of white people doing this thing. We're just calling it Alex is Black. Like, I am Alex, and I am black.
Yeah.
And this is how I'm." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So even then, I found myself feeling the need to explain. I would say that on sets, or certainly in the rehearsal room, there have been moments where I've gotten to read, black characters. That's one thing I've done. Like, and as a lot of actors, up and coming actors in the city will know, you do a lot of readings, and you do a lot of things that when you get the email to do them, you're like, "Oh, this is gonna be dope. This is gonna be it." And then you're like in somebody's apartment, and which is great, which is a way you need to do those things, but it's also like you're not gonna put that on your resume. But where you're reading something, I'm like, "Oh, I'm getting to read a black character."
Yeah.
And this guy's a black man, I get to read it. But it's also like, well, yeah, because it's a reading, and I know that I'm the blackest actor that was available. You know what I mean? Like, you were struggling to find, or that's my insecurity. It could be that they go, "I like Alex. I think he's talented. He's black, and have no qualms having him read this part." But for me, I'm sitting there going, "Oh yeah, so the actual black guy actor that wasn't available or wasn't interested." Some combination of the above.
And it can be both. Yeah.
Yeah.
It can be both.
And so those things happen. I remember specifically, I was reading this part that was written by a much older playwright, who at the time was probably in his 70s. And I was reading this character, and it was me, and then an older white man was reading one other role, and then a cis white woman was reading this other role. And we got to the end of it, and I just had I was like, "I don't know that you are the guy to write this story where the lead character is this black character," and I didn't say that to him, but I was trying to ask questions in a way that was like, "Hey, so you might want to think about the fact that there's not a person of color working on this, and these are some lines that I just I don't know if I'm being super sensitive about it, or if it's an actual issue. You might want to talk to some more people, maybe get some more eyes on it, and look at this, because I think these issues with this character could be problematic." And I could tell that the woman agreed with me, but the director, the guy who was directing it, he didn't. He was kind of pushing back against it. The playwright wasn't necessarily, but the director was pushing back against it. And I felt it was like that awkward moment where you're like, "Okay, are we on opposite sides of an idea here?"
Right.
And are we having to have this argument? And then also feeling like I only have half a leg to stand on, so to speak, in this argument, and to say, it's like, "Look, I don't have dark skin. I walk through the world. The world sees me mostly as a white man, but I can tell you that as an African American, like, this bothers me." And so if it bothers me, it probably might bother other people. And he was just very dismissive, and I could tell the woman was getting very uncomfortable, and we'd never met before. It was like with the exception of the playwright, we all had only just met that night.
Wow.
And it was a very strange thing, but I wondered, like, well, if I looked, quote unquote, looked more of who I am, would that guy think to push back against me or to speak about blackness as if he, to try to black-splain me, so to speak. But in general, in New York, and I think probably because we're in New York and because I get to work with artists like you who are also artists of color, because we have this pantheon of people of diversity, it doesn't come up a whole lot. But that example is probably the most egregious one.
Yeah. No, and I would say, like, and like when we worked on Locked Up Bitches, me and Juan got looped in because Katya had a moment of like, and shout out to Katya. We had a moment. She had a moment of like, bro, I have these Latin cats, and like she never. I think at that point either never had someone who was actually Latinx playing the role, or people who were like almost or biracial, and but like not actually being raised within a Latin context. So like they were like biologically, but like had no real connection to their Latin side. And she quickly was like, this is just not gonna work, and I'm a white woman writing a hip-hop musical. You know what I mean? And so even like that project was so interesting because the passion behind making sure that the cast was as diverse as motherfucking possible, and all the versions of the show, I feel like they get closer and closer and closer to like, just making it maybe one of the most diverse things that happens on the stage, you know what I mean? In New York City on a given night. And I think that that's important, and I feel like people are so afraid to be wrong sometimes about it. And if we can't be wrong about it, how are we going to be right? So like if someone like Katya can't say, I totally like botched that first, casting, and not because the person wasn't talented in any way. That person is awesome, talented, 100%, but like the authenticity of the story. And it's like, doesn't everyone though want their story to be as authentic as possible? And so despite the sort of like dancing the line that happens for biracial people when creatively, or even when they speak and just move through the world, it's like, well, maybe there's a chance to be wrong, you know what I mean? And like maybe in a way, the way like within our own community, we like push back and are so hard, takes away the validity of what is your Black experience. You are a Black man. And quite frankly, when I saw you, I didn't think you were white at all. Like, you know what I mean? I thought, like I said, I thought you were Puerto Rican. And I thought you were Puerto Rican because the little hair. And I was like, oh, the light skins, because the Boricua boys are always the light skinned boys. You know what I mean? And the Dominican boys tend to be the tan. But here I'm sitting next to a Boricua boy with some color. Like, you know what I mean? But like it's almost like we know each other. Like our communities can identify each other.
Yes.
I knew you were not white.
Yeah.
Or you are white, but I knew that you weren't.
You weren't
all, like 100%. White.
Yeah.
You weren't Anglo-Saxon. Like I was like, yeah, no, he's something. And I just thought Latino because Latino, the term mulatto, and even like and Dominicans would call you habao, right? Is the term for Black people who like are a little blonde, have lighter eyes, have lighter skin. But you're a habao because like that is literally, it's almost like a lightening of the true root. Like you are Black, you're just like Black, and it's so interesting that and like biracial is a word, but it's so interesting that like it's even like that had to be made up in a sort of like, people needed to create this terminology because people couldn't do that. Again, boxes, right?
First of all, I think it speaks to like the deep rootedness of wanting to be accepted as a Black person, that when you called me a Black man, I felt a little bit of water come up into my eye, and not that I was about to cry, and I do cry pretty easily at stuff. But I was just like, oh man, yeah, and I will speak to like you guys seeing me as other, and in a good way, as in not white. That I can also, I feel like I can base how diverse you the individual when grew up, how diverse your life was when you look at me, and whether or not you go, hey, are you, or talk to me like a white person, or just assume. And only maybe a handful in my entire life have there been people of color who were surprised by me saying that I was mixed, who weren't like, oh, I thought you were something, I didn't know you were Black, or at least that. But only a few people are like, oh, really? I'm like, oh, you must not be looking at me at all.
Yeah.
Because it's like it's there. Like
Yeah.
I know that it's there. You know that we as people of color can look at each other and you can feel. Don't touch my hair unless I give you permission.
Right.
But it's like we can see it in each other, despite the shade of our skin, because we grew up around, because our families we they look like that.
Yeah.
But it is something where I'm like, oh, okay, you must have grown up in a very white place
Yeah.
if you can't tell at all.
Yeah. I mean, you and my dad are the same complexion. And look at my dark ass. And my mom is actually Skittles, maybe a little lighter than Skittles. And her father was black as fuck. like black as fuck. And so my brother is darker than me. And like, then all this mix happened. So like, I look at my own family. My sister used to get away with convincing me that I was adopted. Because I'm like, you're right. I am darker than mommy and papi. There's no way I'm mommy and papi's child.
Vanessa,
yep. You know what I mean?
There's hope for my kid. Yeah. All right.
There literally is hope for your child. And so thank you for sharing all of that. It was really, really insightful. And I think it's a conversation that doesn't happen enough. So please keep writing. Alex is Black. I will continue watching. Everybody, y'all need to watch. Hire this motherfucker. He is so talented. Hire him. Get to know him. Engage his art. Fucking wonderful, wonderful man. Thank you.
And go see Puffs.
We didn't. Do you really quickly want to plug Puffs and talk about Puffs?
Yeah, for sure. Puffs is it's a parody on the world of a certain magic wizard that we all know. Yes. And it focuses on the underdog. It's an underdog story. And my favorite thing about this show, which is a show that I loved before I even became a part of it as an actor, is that it's funny, but it has heart. Like there are jokes throughout the entire show, but the last few moments of the show, like people cry, people tear up, and it's legit. Like it has a message, but it's super fun. And if you don't know the world of a certain magic wizard, you can still have fun. But if you do at all, if you like Harry P at all, I have to be very careful.
I know. Yeah.
Because I'm known as the one in the cast who always slips up and will say something copywritten, and they're like, Alex, you got to protect the business. And I'm like, I'm sorry. My bad, guys, my bad. But it's super fun. It plays at New World Stages. Right now we're at 8 shows a week, so Tuesdays are our dark day. Other than that, you can find us at 8 p.m. every night except for Sunday night, where we're 7:30, and then a 2 p.m. matinee on Saturdays, and a 3 p.m. matinee on Sundays. And we're about the Puffs, the underdogs.
Yeah, and I am a huge fan of this random mystical world. A huge fan. Have not seen Puffs. I need to come out and see
Yes.
Puffs.
Yeah.
I need to make sure that I come out. I'm very protective of my nerdisms, and I've only heard amazing things. So I'm so happy. And now that you're in it, I'm like, hell yeah.
Yeah.
We gotta make our way. And so I just want to wrap up with Luz, Dame Luz. So in our Dame Luz section, you give me and Juan a little bit of light on a certain topic. So I wanted to hear about your dad jitters, really. And you talked a little bit about it in the beginning in terms of like raising your child in general. But like, what about the whole going through pregnancy? Like, is Jill freaking out on you? Are we in cravings mode yet? Like, where are you? How are you feeling?
Okay, so she right now is she's in her second trimester, and she is 15 weeks or almost 15 weeks. So not quite. Whatever the next month is, she's between months. So yeah, she's not quite 4 months, but she's one of those weeks. Anyway, so the first
clearly this is daddy talking,
and we're like no help. We're like, because I'm trying to think to myself, how many weeks is in a month?
I know.
I'm sitting here like, damn, I have no idea what the pregnancy process is really like.
So one of the things they do in the pregnancy process is they always equate the size of your child to a fruit. So like it starts off small. There was a time where we had a little raspberry, and then a lemon and a lime, and right now it's a navel orange, and then we'll move on to, I think, an avocado is on the horizon.
Ooh. Do we ever get a melon?
I think we do. We're not there. So we have this little chalkboard in our kitchen, and so Jill has drawn. She can fit 4 fruits at a time. So it's like this week this fruit, this week this fruit. So there's not a melon on there yet, but we'll get there.
Okay.
Nice.
And so the first trimester traditionally is where all the nausea comes in, morning sickness. Although they say morning sickness, but it happens pretty much throughout the day. And for Jill, it happened basically around meal times throughout the day. And we were on vacation in New Orleans, and we were visiting.
Oh, that sucks.
Food is so good. In
Yeah. We set up this vacation because the black side of my family, on my mom's side, both her dad and mother are from Louisiana, and so we have this family farm there that's on my maternal grandmother's family, which actually their last name is Haynes, just like mine from the white side. So we all my mom would always joke that my dad was her cousin.
Yeah.
Because they owned us way back in the day.
I was literally gonna. I didn't want to make the joke, but I was like, somebody owns somebody.
Yeah. And so we were like, we've never been to New Orleans. Let's go to New Orleans. It was our 6th anniversary trip. We'll go to New Orleans, and then we can also take this 2.5-hour drive and go see my family property that I'd never seen. And I learned so much about it that my mom and her siblings, they would go there every summer until they were 18. And my grandmother was the oldest of 12. So it was like everybody would come back in the summer, and they were in Louisiana. And it was like, I also learned that if you've seen the movie Mudbound on Netflix, so the woman who wrote that, her grandmother, who she based the story off of, is my grandfather's cousin. So so Dearies, if you're listening, if she's listening, if we can connect us, because she wrote that screenplay based off of her grandmother's diaries and all this information she has that connect back to her relatives that were slaves, who obviously through some are some 4th or 5th cousin of mine that were slaves. And so to have that information would be great, not just not even from a like professional actor standpoint, but just from like, this person is like my family and has info. But so the crux of that story is that you have a black man from World War II and a white man from World War II, but they come back, and then something happens, and like the KKK wants to mess with them, and so he's got to get out of town. And essentially my grandfather and my quote unquote Uncle John Jay, who I think was like a cousin or whatever, they were in town. They had just come back from World War II. My grandfather drove trucks for General Patton to deliver supplies for D-Day. They were the red rollers, or the red something. You can look it up. And John Jay whistled at a white woman, and so and she told on him, and the white folks were like, "You guys we're coming for you." And so my grandfather left Louisiana and went up to Kansas, where his brother was, and then 2 years later had to come back for my grandmother, who he had met in high school. And so which is very similar to the story of Mudbound. But anyway, so we were so we were there. Sorry for that.
No, that's history. I'm here like, damn, I want to see that shit.
Yeah, it was crazy to learn, and it's crazy. I've learned so many things about that family since my mother has passed, because of course you lose a family member, especially a mom, and you're like, oh shit, I have all these questions I need to ask. But anyway, so we were like, we got to go on this trip, and then we found out we were pregnant like 2 weeks before that. And so like, okay, so we're going to New Orleans, where you want to eat and you want to drink, and that's about all you want to do. And you not only can't you do either, because not only is she a vegetarian, but then she's got all these things that she can't eat. Like you can't eat no goat cheese, like no unpasteurized cheese, no raw eggs, so no even like runny yolks, no only 1 cup of coffee, all these limitations, no oysters. Yeah, exactly, right.
Orleans are amazing.
None of that stuff. And then on top of that she was at the height of her nausea and fatigue and everything. So just now, in this point, week 15 roughly, she's coming out of that, and she's like, oh, I'm ready to make food again, and I'm excited to eat again. So that's what's happening right now.
Oh, thank God.
Which is great. And I was saying this to Julissa earlier, but I feel so much as the man, like, what good are men? Like, I helped create
it, but chilling.
Like her body is doing all this. She's creating our child. It's gonna come out, and that's gonna be our baby and our kid and our family, and she's the one making it. And all I can do is be there to support and take out the trash a little bit more because it makes her nauseous to take it out. And it just sort of feels like, wow, I want to contribute and I want to help in this moment in time, but all I can really do is just be there and support because I don't have a uterus and I can't grow this baby, and it's her who has to go through all this and be reminded every day, and you have to make sure to sleep on her side and not on her back because they could both die instantly if she's there's this weird thing where when you're pregnant after a certain week, not at the beginning, so like if you're worried you might be pregnant and then and you sleep on your back, don't worry, you're not gonna, you know what I mean, and you don't know yet, you're okay. But after a certain point in your first trimester, you can't sleep on your back because it's like there's this freak thing that happens every so often, like 1 in 1,000 cases, where it's like either a blood vessel or a nerve, something is pressed, and it's like your heart stops and the baby's heart stops, or something along those lines, where it's like instant death. So you have to sleep on your side.
The fuck?
Yeah, it's like this because like the baby is pressing on your spine in a weird way, or one of your major blood vessels. So yeah, I'm just here doing whatever, but also knowing that our lives are going to change. And I'm sitting here like, what can I do? I'd love to, I bought a lottery ticket. Maybe we'll become billionaires tonight. But
$5 if y'all win.
Yeah. It's just like I feel so. I feel like I'm just in awe of her and feeling like I want to make sure I'm giving her due and space and respecting what she's going through, while also figuring out ways to pull my fucking weight and be ready as we can be, knowing that we'll never be ready and that we're gonna learn as we go.
What are you most excited about for when the baby comes?
Oh man, I'm excited to teach my child things and to show them the world. Because of Puffs, I was able to quit my long-time job for 8.5 years or more of teaching soccer to little kids. And so I worked with predominantly 2 to 5 year olds, but some slightly younger and some older. And I do a couple of side gigs with teenagers and stuff. But I have a lot of experience with kids who are 2 to 5 and having them ask me questions and being able to be like, oh, I taught them that. And I taught them how to do a pullback on a soccer ball. And when I taught them, I remember when I first started, I used to have stud earrings. I have 2 piercings on both lobes. And they were like, only girls can have earrings. And I was like, no, actually boys can have earrings too. And then I was told to take them out because that child went home and told their parents that Coach Alex said boys can have earrings, and their parent didn't like it.
Way.
Yes way. And so they're like, Alex, yeah, you should take your earrings out. And that's when I kind of stopped wearing them because I was like, oh, I don't want to forget these at work, because you know how it is. You wear studs, you just leave them in all the time. And so there's an example of the Midwest being conservative, conservative in a surprising way for you. But getting to teach my child and say, this is our family and this is what we do, and having family traditions and things that will stick in my child's memory, so that when they're doing a podcast years down the line can be like, oh yeah, well when my mom and dad had me, they were living on Amsterdam Avenue, and my dad would get his hair cut at the Puerto Rican barbershop right downstairs, and he would let me sit in his lap and this and that, and we were friends with all the neighbors and stuff. And I'm very cognizant of the fact that Jill and I, we're sort of walking in the footsteps of my parents, and I'm going to be almost a year older than my dad was when they had me.
Wow.
Which feels very strange to be like, oh wow, like that's how young you were. Like,
yeah,
because you look up to your parents, you're like, and for a certain amount of time, you're like, parents, they know everything. And then you get to the age that your parents were when they had you, and you're like, oh shit, y'all didn't know shit. So I'm just excited. I'm excited for that, to create those memories and to have our family grow, because we already are a family. But to like teach part of the new generation and have this new exciting thing.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. I can't wait until the baby comes and see all the pictures and all that stuff. Love baby pictures, so definitely post all the baby. Me and Skittles, all the baby pictures.
I love baby pictures.
Love it so much. Alex, where can we find you?
You can find me at uptown_Haynes, Haynes, on Instagram and on Twitter. alex-haynes.com. And you can find me at New World Stages, 8 shows a week doing puffs.
Absolutely. And you can follow us at Ladies Who Bronche on Instagram and Facebook, at Ladies Bronche on Twitter. Follow, like, subscribe, share the shit out of this episode. And until next time, bronche.